This is Leverage, the podcast about power, politics, and influence. I'm Kristal Taylor.
And I'm Breon Wells.
And we are twinning so hard today.
We are.
Twinning?
We twinning in the color schemes. We twinning in the blackness.
All the blackety blackness.
The only space we're not twinning is the shades and versus the glasses. But the reason I have my shades on twin indoors is because this topic we're talking about today is so messy. My eyes hurt. I decided to do like the Devo kind of, I can't. I have a headache when I think of January 6th and all of the things.
If need be, look, if need be, I could face the sun and get these transitions popping. Okay. So we could be twinning in that regard too. Where do we begin?
We should begin at the beginning because twin, we have a whole coup attempt happened while we were in our hiatus, while we was breaking in this podcast life, and then the podcast was a whole. So we owe it to our subscribers that might have lived under a rock, although I know most of them don't, to start from the beginning.
I mean, well, the beginning is an orange baby was elected. An orange baby was in office. Said orange baby lost the re-election attempt. And then threw a temper tantrum, the likes of which an egomaniacal, narcissistic, seditionist, traitorous orange baby could only do. And now the dear folks in Congress who are, they just have so many things on their plate, but there is a House Select Special Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, because apparently insurrection was at the top of some people's bingo cards for 2021. And now, a year and a half later, we are in the midst of these hearings. There have been, about half a dozen hearings so far, and I believe there are two more left to go.
Public hearings. Mm-hmm.
Public hearings left to go. And we could call them hearings. We could also call them, let's just, for the congressional record, collect and place receipts, because don't let me say who among us did not understand and anticipate how this insurrection came to be, right? Because in our hiatus, we also got introduced to this whole universe of alternative facts. Remember that?
Yep.
Not lies, alternative facts.
By one Kellyanne Conway,
who worked for Orange Baby.
Kellyanne Conman. No, sorry, Conway. That's right. I mix those two up regularly.
Kellyanne Con Artist.
Yes. The Con Artist formerly known as Kellyanne Conway.
And need to be contrite, I don't know, stunt double for Skeletor. I don't know. It's so many things. We're not going to be petty today.
Stunt double for Skeletor.
We just,
the petty runs deep already in this episode. It's just going to.
The petty already runs deep.
It's going to be.
I think we have to first really acknowledge, and this is like the universal disclaimer we have to say, democracy only works if you work it. And democracy is only as effective as the people in office, and then the people holding those people in office accountable. And, democracy is on the brink right now in America because we just out here wilding out.
Well, I would also add to that, though, the democratic ideals that we espouse are only as strong as they are for all people. Because let's start here, since we're already on this petty train and it's got some good momentum. Twin, if you had been out there in them streets conducting a coup, would we even be seeing you on this podcast?
You remember Minority Report? that Tom Cruise movie from like ages ago. If folks who look like us, twin, even think about, okay, you talk about these thought crimes, the precogs, like we gonna hem you up because you had an errant search on Google. You was too deep on IG with your hashtag game, and we got to make sure that when you ready to knuck, we hear the buck. Yep. So this would and what happened on January 6th and in the months since is truly so American. It is so American. Yep. It is so uniquely possible that you have self-righteous people who feel so entitled, who cling so tightly to their deluded beliefs that it can't possibly be the case that the person we wanted to get elected lost. No. There's fraud. There's mass fraud. The only way to save the republic is to storm the Capitol. Man.
Allow me to bring our subscribers in through a story. The reason I'm gonna do a story time. So twin, just recently, this young, innocent, we're not gonna say the race of this kid, came up to me and stopped me in LA and was like, "Excuse me, are you Morgan Freeman?" I know. And I was, and
that's almost as good as my first year of college. A very sweet person, innocently, very sweet young woman came in my room, and I used to have these ginormous posters of Bob Marley up on my wall, and she was like, "Oh, who's that?" I said, "That's Bob Marley." She's like, "Is that like your cousin?"
See, so in these streets, when I got caught, my family told me, well, the bright side of it is he's a great storyteller and you're a storyteller. So in the spirit of
apparently Morgan Freeman, I need you to flex that God voice. Okay, just drop it some.
I don't think I had enough. Dear Kristal, do not be out there on January 6th of 2021. Sincerely, God. Did that work? Did that work?
Perfect. Or like in the beginning, there was insanity, and it proceeded in the form of a tempestuous orange baby. And that said baby wrought forth hell, fire, and brimstone,
the likes
of which we have never before seen.
Oh my. Look, we have in some ways laugh at this topic so that we don't get outright angry. So what happened on January 6th is constitutionally, Congress certifies, right, and goes over these election results in each of the state levels for the presidential election. And they have that constitutional right and that power. January 6th is when we found out that there apparently could be other fake electors who could be put in place of the constitutionally acknowledged electors
because we said so.
Because we said so.
Because we said so.
In the world of whiteness. Now, the backdrop, before we get to January 6th, we have to remember that this was the same year that there was a whole bunch of protests on the street about the murder of George Floyd, about Breonna Taylor's murder, about Arbery, in which you had these vigilantes who were not unlike those in, the Jim Crow South, who donned on their little badges to go and play, police, which really morphed into our current police force here, but we'll save that for another day. This was that backdrop in which you had these protesters out on the street. You had Donald Trump order the military to literally conduct harm on people outside of the church, not far from the White House. You had protests around the country that was met with a lot of violence and brutality, in which police were saying, not today. Then on January 6th,
where'd they go?
We had some angry folks who, you know, they decided they wanted to don on pitchforks and, you know, batons, and, you know, they had all the fire. They had nooses, literal nooses.
Can we
Galleys.
put a footnote and
Yeah,
say, and so, oh, by the way, there's no way this just happened to emerge
it
as
didn't.
like, oh, a peaceful protest gone awry. Like, no, y'all came to town ready. You
That's
came
right.
prepared. Y'all had been plotting, planning, scheming, doing all your stuff, packing your hoods. Oh, I'm
Yep.
sorry. That's
So,
rude.
and at the White House, President Trump, then President Trump, had incited this riot little by little. And as we are finding out in January 6th, just how much he overlooked the weaponry that was there. So that his supporters, because after all, what was the quote? They're not here to hurt me. So that makes it okay, because they're
Right.
not here to hurt me.
But we gonna go get Pence though. We gonna go get your
That's
vice
right. And
president
so
because
they went
you was big
marching.
bad. You was big petty mad that
They,
your vice president thought it was okay to certify the votes when you ain't win the election.
yep. And
Continue.
so, and so since I'm so extra petty, some of those conservatives and Republicans that were in the mix, who were the same ones that wanted to demonize Michelle Obama for her fitness plan, suddenly had their little steps in on their Fitbit and their calories that they're walking off from the White House to the Capitol, you know, from the
He was
window.
moving fast to the wall.
Uh-huh,
To
they was
oh,
moving.
they was moving.
They were exercising the likes of which their body had never seen before either.
First time doing the cha-cha slide was
Right.
down the halls of Congress, trying to
So
escape.
they head down, as we tell this story, to the Capitol, and then they start to proceed to storm the Capitol. Now, what's interesting is that summer prior, Black people who were just walking outside to say, we don't like what's happening to us with no weapons, were being
Or
met with
just
tear
stop killing
gas
us.
and right, and
Just stop
you know,
killing us.
beating us and all this brutality. These white protesters who were draped in the Christian flag, who were draped in the US flag, some of them even were bold enough, as who could blame them, to have the Confederate flag around them, you know, and they stormed said Capitol, and they were met not with violence. When they sneezed, it would seem that some in the police force was like, oh, bless you, here's a tissue. And they escorted them up the stairs and they escorted them down safely. And yet then there were still others who had some of this law enforcement that had brutality exercised against them by the Back the Blue squad. Now, somebody riddle me where that makes sense. And yet, in the wonderful world of whiteness, in which you think, just like, not unlike with Putin in Ukraine, surely they're not going to attack this space. No, they're just demonstrating.
They're demonstrating that they brolic is all get out.
Yep.
And stuff is hit the fan.
Yep. So on that day, you had some cabinet officials who in the president's cabinet, like Elena Chow and Betsy DeVos, that decided they needed to move on because somehow the last 4 years weren't a bridge too far, but a coup on your last few days was the bridge too
That's
far
the one.
for you to.
That's the one.
That was the straw that broke the camel's back.
14 days before the official transfer of power. Like, you know what? It's time to go.
I can't stomach anymore the tearing and shredding of our Constitution. What have y'all been embarking in over the last 4 years?
This was the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, it's like related all the people who suddenly became, can you really be called a whistleblower if you that far after the fact? But like all these people who have emerged from the ashes. Well, we were just trapped and you ain't know. We come on. We've been talking about this for years now, no?
Yep.
And it's just suddenly now like, oh, well, my conscience dictates that I must take other steps to.
Well, and to your point though, twin, our current president, President Biden, did make a statement on that day. And I would grade that statement as not just complicated on Facebook, but I would say confused. And here's why. He started at the top of his speech with the same rhetoric we have heard every other time a tragedy and or a terroristic act occurs. This is not who America is.
Except it is.
There it is.
Except it is, right? Like at a certain point, we have to stop deluding ourselves about what this country is. Are there amazing people in America? Absolutely. Are there tremendous freedoms that we have, many of which are about to get stripped away by the Supreme Court? Absolutely. Uh-oh. We're gonna come back to all of this. But we have to not act as if this very country was not born out of struggle, violence, and strife. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and for whom? And for whom? America was started by a wealthy, landed class of white men who did not want the oppressive tyranny of British rule anymore.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then our system, our very founding documents, right, was predicated upon establishing a state of order and being that provided value and protection for those very rich, wealthy, land-owning white men. We were not, people of color, women, we were not contemplated as the beneficiaries of what this country's original promise was. America is becoming because we fight for it. You know what I'm saying? Like there's this persistent struggle. Like, well, y'all declared equity. Let's make that thing ring for everybody. Yep. Right. But like we've got to stop. We have got to stop acting like this isn't who we are. That's exactly who we are.
Well, okay, here's why I graded as confused. He started there, twin. But then he ended with, in that speech, you know, my granddaughter told me that had it been Black people, that, you know, had this been Black Lives Matter, that they would have been met with violence. And I said, you're absolutely right. Okay, hold on, make that make sense. How is it this is who America is? This is not who we are. And then you side with your granddaughter that, and so that's why it's rated #confused. He was confused on what he wanted to say and his relation to the truth and the reality of this country.
And the thing is, like, it's so funny, right? And I think these, in certain ways, like the January 6th hearings bespeak this. America has never had our own truth and reconciliation process. And so the country continues to be disjointed and schizophrenic when it comes to connecting the ideals that we so-called uphold and the application of those ideals and to whom, you know, these ideals can actually benefit and apply. And that same level of confusion in that initial statement, you see in these hearings, on one hand, testimony about very calculated, dastardly deeds, right? That are like, clearly like, oh, so you know how you was like, what does it mean to be treasonous? What does sedition actually look like?
Right here.
Textbook example, right here. And yet you still see this grappling with, but the better angels, and we can't be this, but
yep.
This is not only who you are, this is what you have enabled through willful neglect and intentional action in other instances, right? Because the person who orchestrated this, first of all, it's too deep, too petty. We put a lot of blame at the feet of Donald Trump for the things that have happened in this country over the past 4 years. But he is the byproduct of a systemic problem. Okay. You know what I'm saying? Like he is not the genesis. He could not have ascended to his levels of political clout without an established system in play that primed the ground for him. And in so many ways, he's like the reality show version of Ronald Reagan. It's like down to some of the exact phrases, right? And stuff that he like, make America great. That was Ronald Reagan, you know? But it's like you look at what that presidency was, and just like changes that have happened in the country in those years since. Like we're at an interesting place. An
We
interesting
are.
place indeed.
Before we get to the politics of this, there were some things we knew immediately before the January 6th Commission had even been formed, was even a thought. We knew that Clarence Thomas's wife, Jenny Thomas, Jenny from the Block is who we'll call her for today. Jenny from the Block had funded.
Soon to be Jenny on the cell block.
Right. Jenny had funded, a couple of buses of what we would now rightfully label terrorists. And let them tell it as they were donned in their Christian flags, God's little arsonists, who were making their ways to the Capitol. We knew that she had a hand in at least getting people there. What's not known is, so you're a, sitting Supreme Court justice's spouse. Did any of his money go to, now, wait a minute. And how much, look, what did he know? When did he know it? What did he do once he found out those things? Those are yet to be determined. But we also knew there was a pipe bomb that had been planted outside the DNC apparatus. There was the very, very real threat of, on not just Mike Pence, which was very overt and clear. I don't know how much clearer you need to be than hang Mike Pence.
I think that was still a little subdued, though.
Got it.
It was metaphorical.
They still had more in the tank. And so, but then we had this delay of the National Guard within DC being brought to the scene. I mean, it was hours of chaos, which almost could have been looked at as a modern day Game of Thrones scene, down to the overt whiteness on the set.
I was just waiting for Daenerys to run through, because like those fiery images in the Capitol, clearly there was a dragon. Daenerys Targaryen on a dragon was like blazing in the background.
So then there was the opportunity, to your point, Twin, of Republicans and of the broader culture to say, no, this is wrong. And we found out that there was those things behind the scenes, but publicly those things didn't really happen. We then have a call for a commission to study all that happened with January 6th, from the failures within the law enforcement system at the Capitol to, who knew what and when, and did indeed President Trump orchestrate these things? This was the pretext with which this January 6th commission was there. And it was intended to be bipartisan. And then Kevin McCarthy said, hold my beer. And while you hold my beer, I'm gonna go to the restroom instead of being here where I need to be. So you only have two Republicans that are part of the commission, and that would be Liz Cheney and that would be Adam Kinzinger. Adam Kinzinger will not be here next Congress. Liz Cheney is in a fight for, her political survival in Congress, at least right now. They have since removed her from being the number 3 on the Republican Party, I mean, how bizarre is that? Someone with the last name Cheney, who has enjoyed power, is now being ousted as not being somehow radical enough, when it was your daddy that helped get us in this war. That was, where my shade? I almost
make it make sense.
My head hurts.
But this is how these are like these bizarro, like little bizarro cartoon strips back in the day. Like this is bizarro version of American politics at its worst. And like it's, I think all the way back, to President Obama's tenure, and the emergence of the Tea Party, and this consistent insistence that, government doesn't work, government is broken. And literally you have people who took office for the very purpose of disrupting the function of government. So it becomes this very strange self-fulfilling prophecy, which I mean, don't let me try and project what the ultimate desired outcome is, but are we trying to move towards a system where we're saying government is so ineffective and inefficient, ergo self-rule and let's go? Like, good luck. Let's see what it is. Because I mean, like, the pattern and practice over the last decade, amplified by the last 5 years, seems to be leading towards that conclusion that government in America is shifting from this social construct of this is an institution that is meant to help uphold and support the peaceable function of society. And it's more like, well, this is a bargaining chip and let's do whatever we can to get more power.
Yeah. So, and I don't disagree with you, Twin. I would say this, and this is the thought that just came to my mind as you were talking. When people ask, because this January 6th commission has almost been like a good episode of Maury, where, who's
you
the father?
Are not the father.
I used to rush home when I was in undergrad. I used to rush back from class just to see track stars being produced every day at 4 p.m.
Every
right?
day. All day.
But we've been tuning into what is become a soap opera, what's supposed to be a trial. And I would say what's on trial, I would say accountability is on trial. I would say accountability is on trial. This notion of whether we want to hold folks accountable or whether we don't and we want to look the other way. We had the January 6th commission as an attempt to provide some sort of accountability, but you have one major party that has decided they don't want accountability. They want accountability in terms that suit them, but we don't want to do this full scope of accountability. And I would also offer that the broader vast majority of the country, there's still a question mark on the air on whether we want to have the full conversation of accountability on how we got here. Because to your point, whether you are Obama or whether you are Donald Trump, two polar opposites, success and failure require a culture.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the willful ignoring of the Tea Party that set the prime text that gave rise to a Donald Trump being acceptable. It was the pettiness of an Obama era administration and society deciding, that they don't really want to do accountability that led to, I mean, in one sense, if we look realistically at history and how we've given a pass to certain people, can you blame Donald Trump for trying what would we've been giving folks passes if you white and you a man and you wealthy in this country forever?
But also, like, again, to this point of Donald Trump being a symptom or a byproduct, right, of this erosion, right, of democratic value and personal and political accountability, right? It is fascinating to think how, one, the way over time politics has morphed away from, kind of this is your baseline duty, right, as an American, right, be engaged in the civic process. It has gone from what frankly should be pretty mundane. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you really think about it, the ways we engage with politics should be more like paying bills. All right. It doesn't have to be sexy. It doesn't have to be sensational. It's part of what we do as responsible grown-ups. That's what it should be more like, right? Instead, we have over time, because this is part of what American culture is, we have sensationalized politics so it feels more like sport. It feels more like the Super Bowl. It's more about a winner and a loser. It's more about, ooh, what's going to keep my eyes enwrapped to this screen and have me emotionally inflamed and caught up and so our political engagement system and process has gone from what should be some very simple, like, look, everybody ain't gonna win all the time. How do we achieve some level of consistent consensus that generally produces an okay result for most people?
Yep.
That should be what it feels like. But it's not. It is now this winner takes all, high stakes reality TV version, soap opera, as you're calling, these hearings, right? And it's all about what can we do to basically inflame you so that we can sell you anything. And whatever we're selling you may be political ideology, it may be products, it may be levels of dysfunction. You know what I'm saying? Because like if we have a captive audience who is so emotionally keyed up that they lose the ability to engage with logic and reason, like things like January 6th, not a foregone memory, but it doesn't even seem that strange anymore, does it? Realistically,
no, it doesn't.
Like we watched and it was like, wow, are they really doing this? And then you flip the channel and turn to something else because there's a level of dissociation that is taking place in our culture right now where the things that are meant to be sensational and have you all keyed up, you have your moment and then you keep it moving. And so you don't even find people in a position to rightfully engage and pause and be like, yo, this is dumb. We're really like far afield right now. We have to reset. And we are out here floating in the wind. Like,
yeah, accountability is on trial. And I think that part of the problem then that we have is, as we unpack, with this January 6th commission, they've had now, as you said, a number of hearings. Cassidy Hutchinson was definitely, that hearing was the most salacious, in which we found out that the president did say, we saw him saying, I'm gonna march with you all over to the Capitol. By March, he meant I'm gonna have my Secret Service drive me and I'll meet you there. And then that was his intention, was to be there. And we saw he was so committed to that intention that apparently he lunged at Secret Service and tried to grab the wheel to drive them. I don't know that he fully thought through how this was going to work, but he was on his way doing these things. You had a chief of staff, Mark Meadows, who was asleep at the wheel just because, to your point, the salacious nature and the consistent gaslighting and the consistent outrageousness that was the Trump administration didn't just wear on the country, it wore on those around Donald Trump too, where it was just like, whatever, we've got a few days left. We've got 15 days till we get this inauguration. So whatever. Like right. Cassidy Hutchinson, that took off, a whole number of things. But this is why I say accountability is on trial. So the politics of January 6th is this. Why wouldn't Republicans want to hold Donald Trump accountable for his crimes against democracy, his crimes against humanity, his crimes against men and women, Black, and all of the above? I would submit that it's not just like it used to be, this whole win at all cost. I think it's more than that. I think that it's not just simply we wanted to, try to make sure that we're showing this strong face so that, even though we've lost this election, we're going to continue this lie so that we can win in the future. That might be a part of it. The biggest part is the temperature went up on these individual members. Let's not forget, these Republicans were in the Capitol that was being stormed and ransacked. These Republicans had now spent, from the Tea Party time all the way to the future, fomenting this base. What was Donald Trump's first thing, even when he won in 2016? that his margin would have been better had it not been for this stealing of elections that he was at that time talking about Latino Americans, right? And these immigrants that were illegally voting. And that's how, even though he won, he was setting the groundwork for 2020. And his base was eating it up along the way. So when you now see these folks, if you're a Republican and they're storming the Capitol, you're no longer worried just about your political survival. You're actually worried about your actual life now.
Because it comes time where you have to pay the piper.
That's right. And that's what makes them side with a Donald Trump against all odds. Not just the fear anymore that I won't be in Congress anymore, but the fear that these same jokers, these terrorists that rolled up on this Capitol also can roll up on my house if Donald Trump points them to be so. Here's why it makes it a little hard for me to have the full heart of sympathy that may be, required. Y'all built this monster. You weaponized these monsters. And when I say accountability is on trial, it's not just the Republicans that don't want to hold people accountable. I really do, Twin, think that we at the community level need to have an honest look. This is about to be an unpopular what I'm about to say, but we need to have an honest look, an honest conversation with our neighbors that starts something like, why do you feel comfortable continuing to throw some of us under the bus? That start with, I'm not having coffee with you in my hot yoga pants anymore, sis. The 55 and 57% of white women that decided they'd vote for Donald Trump in 2016 and then vote for him and he needed a second chance in 2020. And all of them weren't Republicans. Some of them were progressives and some of them were independents.
Because her emails.
Right. Because her emails. And that's great. And so the issue is we also have to do a better job of holding ourselves accountable, because I would make the argument that January 6th was actually a reflection of where everyday Americans are. And this culture that was produced, you can't have a January 6th without a culture that makes it permissive. So how did we get here where we continue to devalue Black lives, give a wink and a nod to white men and white women that want to storm this Capitol? That didn't just happen in a vacuum. It was decision after decision. It was this system with which we reward wealthy people as if trickle-down economics is somehow going to work and be at a vast for all of us, when what the reality is you reward those who are in alignment with your best interests that can do something for you, and you demonize those who can't do anything for you because your cost benefit analysis says they don't have enough money to be able to stand up to your hired legal guns and to the system that works all too well against them and in your favor.
No, I mean, you're 100% right. But that's why, again, when we talk about this false notion that this isn't who America is, we have to be willing to accept the ugly parts. And yet, you talk about acceptance. Think about the whole debate that took shape in 2021 around critical race theory. The idea that actually confronting American history in its real shape and form, like what has actually happened, not made up, not make believe, not pretend. We can't even say these are things that have happened in this country. These are people who have been actively oppressed. There are people for whom their lives are inherently harder because our legal structure, the policies we implement, and the way we enforce them destitute other folks. We can't say that, because then, to this idea we've talked about before on this show about American exceptionalism, the point at which you have to accept that you done somebody else dirty and that you inherently have a leg up because of your gender, because of your race, because of the privilege that comes with you being a white person in this country, that is a level of reality and truth that a lot of people don't want to face. It doesn't become a crutch or an excuse to say, and therefore, because of inequity, other people can't push forward. No, we still got to push, and also acknowledge what reality is.
Yep.
And it's like, until we move past this deep point of cognitive dissonance. It's not gonna, we just gonna keep amplifying and recycling the same mistakes. Think back to years ago, Malcolm X used to have this great, don't let me say quote, because I will destroy it. We know I am a destroyer of quotes and phrases.
Breaker of chains, destroyer of quotes.
Breaker of chains, right? But he had this great line of conversation around this idea that you can't call it progress if you shoved a knife in my back 10 inches and you've pulled it out 6. The knife is still in my back. You can't even call it progress when you remove the knife from my back. Progress doesn't happen until there's actually healing that can take place. If you can't even acknowledge, as you said, if you can't even acknowledge that you put a knife in my back, you can't get to none of these other states. You can't get to these later points of conversation. So, I hear you and agree that accountability is on trial. Cynical me says, is this even a real trial, or is it just theater? Is it political theater?
That's true. Is it a sham? And I would say January 6th. And so, for our listeners, let's unpack this. What does the January 6th Commission actually get, folks? Let's go ahead and manage expectations, because this is about to go left real quick, right? Congress, this is not a criminal trial and a criminal proceeding. What the process is unfolding is that they're going to do an investigation, and then at the most, what they can do is refer the matter to the Department of Justice for criminal proceedings. So a lot of this January 6th investigation that is happening publicly is, I would say, Democrats are hoping that they arm the public with enough transparency to show beyond a shadow of a doubt and beyond a reasonable doubt that this was a coordinated space, and that when there were plenty of times to turn off this insurrection and this terroristic activity, that it was, intentionally chosen to, instead of turn it off, turn it up and foment it even the more towards an end, in hopes that then the people will stay on top of the DOJ and its administration to then do criminal proceedings. Now, I'm not a betting man, and I definitely would not bet in this case, because as we've seen Merrick Garland's legacy thus far, it might give you pause. If you've seen some of the policies that Joe Biden has espoused, it might feel a lot like Donald Trump's policies, and like we're just continuing on these spaces. So when we say accountability is on trial, you're right. This trial, as far as January 6th Commission, might not produce anything. But the trial I'm talking about this is yet a long trial that happened long before January 6th, in which we have always been able to choose accountability, but we chose not to because we were scared of uncomfortable conversations. And what did we get for what we sowed into uncomfortable conversations? We got a whole insurrection. And so the power side of things, because we always talk about politics and power and then the influence angles, the power side of things would suggest, is there a template with which political parties hold their own accountable to an end that it preserves the overall system? And I would say we have 2 examples, glaring examples, one inside this country and the other outside this country. The glaring one in this country would be the Nixon. Watergate. You had Republicans who said, you know what? The length, the reach with which this president went to try to secure an election for himself at all costs was too high a price for democracy. and the democratic ideals that we quote espouse to, right? And so they held him accountable. You had the Watergate trial. It was impossible to get to that verdict without Republicans holding their own accountable. I say that lest we think that, you know, it's impossible because of what we see today. But then, twin, we just had Boris Johnson over in merry old England. Cheerio.
Cheerio, Fruit Loop.
In the schedule.
Tea and crumpets.
Yes. He is now about to be on a long holiday. Well, others might call it unemployment of a sort. Once he resigned, because he was embedded in a scandal. The latest
scandal.
Well, there was layers of scandals, but
those layers of scandal.
The straw that broke Boris's back, not the cameras, but you see what I did there, twin. The straw that broke Boris's back was one such Christopher Pincher, who he decided to bring in, into his cabinet and into his government. And it was so bad, this Christopher Pincher, because of his sexual misconduct and the allegations of such, which was widely known apparently, that 55 members of Boris Johnson's own party said, nah, fam, a bridge too far. Got to get up out of here.
Can you do that with a British accent though?
Ooh, let me try. Y'all don't judge me. Nah, fam. No, I can't. You've got to get the question mark at the right space. Not to offend my colleagues across the pond. Oh, but so they held him accountable by saying, you're about to bring in this known person that has had sexual misconduct and has done a whole bunch of deviance and some of this corruption, and we won't stand by. This is too high a price. Now, granted, the UK has a parliamentary structure, and we have a republic, and in which we directly elect our president, and so those differences. However, what is similar is you had a party to which the leader of their party was also the leader of the country, and they were willing to say, no, we have a red line.
No more R. Kelly-ness.
No more, what, Robert Sylvester Kelly?
Sylvester Kelly. We don't want that energy.
We don't want that energy.
We don't want that energy here.
Now, granted, again,
they may want it in America, though. But
they might. Look, they said, hold our beer yet again.
Hold our ale.
Hold our ale. But I think the other, the back to our point that we were making earlier, the other part of this is you had these politicians in the UK who were not fearing for their own personal safety. They were fearing for their political safety, and they decided, whatever, let's do what's the right thing to do. So I guess the question is, since accountability is on trial, do you foresee, twin, that these Republicans and conservatives who are now fearing for their actual safety because, Chucky has now gone off the rails and is coming after his maker, and now you fear for your personal safety, do we ever get to a space where this party holds their president, former president, their leader accountable, and themselves accountable?
So here's the thing. I think we've had this conversation before, I feel like, right? I feel like people struggle with, accountability in the same way that we struggle with being honest with ourselves about the limitations of self-interest, right? And because I don't think that most of our politicians here in the States really play out self-interest to the fullest extent, right? Because played out to the fullest extent, accountability actually would be preferred because it provides some buffer, right? It allows you to distance yourself and say, hey, you know what? This was wrong. This is not acceptable. This is not conduct becoming. Accountability in a real way would allow you to say, I have made mistakes for my lack of judgment. And if given the opportunity to serve you again, I will not make those same mistakes. However, because people don't play out self-interest fully to the fullest extent, I think that there are going to be many leaders who unfortunately double down, right? Who cling to the fear, cling to. I do think you do raise some legitimate concerns around actual worry for personal safety. I do think those are some legitimate concerns, but I think that the view is going to be so short term, so myopic in terms of like, oh, but what does this mean for me in terms of power, in terms of my personal privilege, in terms of, you know, the next 2, 4, 6 years. I I, I am not confident that accountability is going to be the choice unless it becomes the only option.
So
right.
I don't disagree with you, twin, but it provokes me to ask another question then. And that focuses on Liz Cheney now then. Because I would make the argument that Liz Cheney is the current test case to the point you just made. I'm not a fan of Liz Cheney's politics. I don't agree, you know, with her. And me personally, this push to give credit, I do believe we should give credit where it's due. But here's where I also am kind of on the fence on this.
It's kind of like I pay for my kids.
Right. Well,
I take care of my kids. That's what you're supposed to do. It's, why you want credit for what you're supposed to do? But continue.
Or even worse than that. To me, twin, it's even worse than that. You probably voted, because the question in my mind this week was, for all of this rhetoric that we have around, you know, Liz Cheney, and not to throw shade at her, but what do some of these same voices do when it sinks back in that there was a high likelihood, and if we find out she did vote for Donald Trump? So the first time. So in one sense, you brought this mess in here. Do we give you a star because you did clean up on aisle 3 from the mess you made? But I would say that this self-preservation in its fullest extent, I do believe there may be some level of which Liz Cheney is being what she would deem patriotic and doing what she believes is the best interest of the country. However, she could also be doing this because, to your point, she sees the self-interest card to its fullest extent, to which it works better to be one that stands against this one person that is problematic, even if I don't fully disagree with all of the policy sides. Because this is the tragedy to me as a policy person of the Donald Trump presidency. We got so caught up on the actions that he was doing,
the distractions,
the narcissistic actions that he was doing,
yes,
that we forgot that from a policy standpoint, he's not too far from which his Republican colleagues and others have been espousing for years and decades. It's just that he says the quiet part out loud. And so what we've done is we've taken all of his salacious actions and forgot that there's more on the policy side where that came from. So you could perceivably have a Liz Cheney and a Mike Pence or these other sides that just don't suffer with the narcissism of to the extent that Donald Trump does, but they espouse the same beliefs and the same systems that cause harm to our people. And lest we stay, you know me, I'm equal opportunist. Lest we stay just in the Republican part, let's go down the Democrats aisle, in which we just had a 2020 election, in which all too many times on those stages and those debates, they said anyone on this stage is better than Donald Trump. Are they though? And I'm gonna ask people now, when we have Democrats that own the White House, the House, and the Senate.
Right.
Is it
now you get
better?
a chance. Now you get a chance to see borne out. Like, so what are the policies that are emanating from this administration,
which have a harsher penalty than
Correct.
any personality? The policy is what hurts people. And yes, it's implemented by people, but it's the ideals enshrined in law that have long-term sustaining effects that hurt people.
And unfortunately, one of the challenging realities is that we remain caught up in the politics, in the games, in the showmanship, in the winner take all, the big personality, whatever. That policy is often what gets glossed over.
Yep.
That's often what gets glossed over. I mean, I think, first of all, I have learned in the last few years not to put too much on or take too much off my bingo card in terms of the realm of possibility.
Not the bingo card.
It's just didn't see it coming, but all right, guess go ahead and start the rapture. Do that next, because we just
not start the rapture. Cue the trumpet. Let the trumpet
cue the trumpet. Like just go ahead and do it. I think it's going to be real interesting to see both what happens over the course of these next two upcoming hearings, especially in this broader context of August recess and then jumping into midterms, right? Because I think one of the dynamics in all of this, even as we say, accountability is on trial, and like how much are y'all really weighing self-interest versus broader calculations? We cannot divorce anything that's happening right now from the other layer of political reality, which is everybody is up for re-election. All 435 members of the House, about a third of the Senate, about a third of U.S. governors, tons of state-based, like down ballot races, looking at local and state-based officials. So that's your city and county leaders, your mayors, your state reps, all of this, right? Cynical me thinks that the record for accountability that is being established is really more about political fodder for midterm season. But that's cynical me. And we shall see how all of this bears out.
I don't know that they're cynical, because as a strategist myself in this for years, I'd say that is a very real reality. So let me give the homework first, and then I'm gonna make a prediction, twin. So as we talk about the leverage, the homework is, I think, since accountability is on trial, you can't hold anyone else accountable until you've held yourself accountable first.
Boop, boop, boop.
So that means we need to stop waiting for governmental officials, elected officials who are incentivized to win at all costs to bring accountability. We, the people, are going to have to be the ones that usher in accountability. So that means we have to start at our local level. We got to start in our families. We got to start in our communities in really articulating a vision that we want to see America have and be committed to that vision. Right. When we hold ourselves accountable as the people, it makes it easier to hold these politicians accountable, because you can't hold someone to a standard that you're not living up to yourself.
Correct.
So that's the homework, right? Let's find ways then. And here's where you can start, since we're in an election season. Figure out what your true values are. I think part of what hurts us is we're not honest with ourselves, including at the individual level. being honest that, you know, it's not my way and I don't like it, but I would prefer someone to be honest and be like, look, I go to the ballot box for me and my four and no more. At least be honest about that. You're not about this social train. You're not about building a better world. You're about your personal feeling comfortable and being secure. Boom.
Or better yet, I don't engage at the ballot box because I don't actually know or believe how my voice and perspective is going to matter.
Yep. Like be
brutally
honest about that, and then use that though measure of accountability if self-preservation is what you want, or if you're trying to actually transform cultures. Either of those, let that be your litmus test, your measuring rod with which you go to the ballot box. And I don't care which party you're talking about. I don't care the color of their skin. If the content of their character and what they are bringing to the table does not matter and measure on your measuring stick, then that might not need to be who you vote for, unless you sure enough got a strategy that is somehow, you know, to use the twins example of a Shonda Rhimes imagination. Unless your strategy is at that level.
Or Jussie Smollett.
Right. We're going to have a whole episode on that because that buffoonery. But, you know, I think that is the homework. Like, let's make it less complicated. Figure out what your real priorities is. If it's your four and no more, then show up to the ballot box with that measuring rod. If you're trying to do real change, that's not easy. There's a lot that comes with that, but that means you need to spend some more time doing the research on these politicians. And after the election, the name of the game is holding them to the standard that, you know, you voted for them for and that they expressed and espoused. Now, here's my prediction. Because culture and everything that I'm reading, you know, you can't have a certain system. I don't care how many times we try to lie and say one thing. Culture is always going to be the truth of where we value, what we hold dear, where we are as a country. The current culture and the tea leaves is saying that Trumpism might just win in the midterms, and Trump or Trumpism might win in 2024 at the presidential space. If Donald Trump himself wins again, this country can no longer say that it is not racist and that that this was a fluke. I mean, most of us don't believe that it was a fluke in 2016 either.
Correct.
But let Donald Trump win in 2024 because he can't win without votes and folks that decide, because even let's forget those that don't vote. The 2016 election was for those that did vote. Those that voted decided that they wanted Donald Trump. And those that didn't agree with that were still trying to be like, let's be friends with all these people. And don't get me wrong, as a faith leader and as a person, a pastor in this whole thing, I do believe in reconciliation. But that is a very, very unacknowledged term. Because when I think, at least from a Christian faith, reconciliation was Jesus full well knew that we was wretched people. He knew we was ratchet people on all the polls, doing all the things that was wrong. And yet he chose to have not only sacrifice his life, but he engaged in all of this uncomfortable conversation to get us to this space. He wasn't scared of the truth. And so we need to hold space for, it's not this either I love you with the sense of we just look past everything and we don't address anything. Or, you know, I just don't do anything about what you're doing and wish you a fast trip to hell. No. Accountability.
Can that please be a shirt though? I wish you a fast trip to hell.
I can't wear that shirt, but
I mean, that might need to be somebody's campaign slogan.
It might
this fall.
But that's the point is we have to bring this radical sense of love. Radical love is actually honest. It includes honesty. Because it says that I love you enough to tell you the truth because we're not okay. It doesn't mean we can't be okay, but it means we're going to have to do the work to be okay. But we must acknowledge that right now, today, we're not okay.
We ain't there. Correct.
And right now, today, I might need to not have lunch with you till you can value the lives of my people or people that don't look like us. Until you can stop throwing other people under the bus for your own self-preservation. Because at the end of the day, what difference is there between you or Donald Trump? And accountability on trial, ladies and gentlemen.
Accountability on trial. Let the church say amen.
Amen.
And we wish you a swift trip to hell.
Oh no.
This is Leverage, the podcast about power, politics, and influence. I'm Kristal Hyde Taylor.
And I'm Breon Wells.